If you've come upon this video tonight, there's probably something deep within you that you haven't been able to let go of. Maybe it's thoughts that keep spinning on repeat, a sense of duty resting heavily on your shoulders, or simply the quiet exhaustion from trying too long to stay strong. Whatever the reason, you don't need to explain it. You don't need to prove that you're okay. Right now, in this very moment of listening to these words, you have the right to rest. You don't have to keep holding on. You don't have to keep pushing through. This is a space meant for you, a space that doesn't demand anything except your genuine presence. We won't try to soothe you with easy promises. Instead, we'll walk together through ancient Zen stories, teachings that have existed for thousands of years, not to escape reality, but to face it with fresh eyes. You don't need to do anything. Just sit down, breathe softly, and let everything else come, like a gentle stream flowing through. Quiet yet profound. This is your moment to return, not to anyone else, but to yourself. Long ago, in a monastery deep within a quiet mountain, a young monk often felt utterly exhausted. Every day, when people came to the temple to pour out their hearts, he would listen to them with his entire being. He sat beside their grief, shared in their tears, and welcomed both their anger and despair, the emotions they couldn't hide. But when night fell and silence enveloped the monastery, his heart remained weighed down by feelings that weren't even his own. He could not sleep. His mind stayed busy with the pain of others, as if that pain had become a part of him. Finally, on a gray morning, he approached his teacher and asked, "Master, I've tried my best to help others. I listen, I empathize, but the more I do, the more exhausted I feel. Where did I go wrong?" The teacher didn't answer right away. He led the young monk to the temple courtyard, to a simple wooden bucket used daily to draw drinking water. Pointing to the bucket, he asked, "When you draw water for the thirsty, do you drink the whole bucket yourself?" The young monk looked surprised and shook his head. "No, Master, I only give them enough to drink." The teacher smiled gently, then softly said, "Then why, when people bring you their sadness, do you drink the entire bucket of their emotions, only to empty yourself?" That question, so simple, struck a chord in the young monk's heart and awakened him. And perhaps it's a question for you too. Maybe you are carrying someone else's sorrow as if it were your own. Maybe you've lived so long in sensitivity and empathy that you forgot that compassion doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. You can love without burden. You can listen without taking on all the pain. Like that well, it keeps flowing with cool water, yet never runs dry. Your heart can offer gentle presence and still preserve quietude for yourself. And that is true love. A love that touches others without losing itself. From that day on, the young monk began seeing himself through new eyes. He realized his kindness had been confused with a responsibility to bear everything. Every time someone cried, he felt he had to soothe them. Every time someone suffered, he thought he needed to suffer alongside them. But he didn't understand that empathy doesn't mean becoming a bottomless container for every fragment of pain. Like the sun that shines everywhere without ever losing its own light. Someone with true compassion knows the balance between presence and dissolving into another's life. They don't dim their own light to let others shine. They don't burn themselves out to warm someone else. They simply show up, steadily, abundantly, like a sturdy tree standing firm in a storm, like a slow-burning ember that never goes out. The young monk learned to sit with others' sadness without secretly bringing it back to his cell. He learned to listen, not to react, but to be present. He no longer spent sleepless nights worrying on behalf of others, because he understood that everyone is walking their own path, and true help isn't walking it for them, but lighting just enough of the path when they feel lost. We often grow in a world that praises thinking of others and regards preserving your own energy as selfish. We punish ourselves for not helping someone, even when we're already depleted. We think love means enduring. Care means accompanying someone all the way through their pain. But what the young monk learned, and what maybe you need to be reminded of, is this: you can love without breaking. You can care without fading away. You don't need to carry the whole world to prove your compassion. And above all, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you keep giving without returning to nourish yourself, you will soon become a dried-up spring. And a dried-up spring cannot save anyone. Zen teaches that no one can learn someone else's lesson for them. No one can live for them, suffer for them, settle their karma for them. Everyone must walk their own path, face their own pain, and overcome it their own way. When you try to do it instead of them, you're not helping, you're interfering. And that interference, even if born of love, is still attachment. The young monk's teacher didn't speak at length. He only offered a simple image, the wooden water bucket, to open a new awareness. And sometimes, just an image like that is enough for you to realize you've held onto far too much that isn't yours. Perhaps it is a loved one's fear. Maybe it's negative emotions from a coworker. Maybe it's someone else's unfinished dreams that you subconsciously think you must fulfill for them. But the truth is, none of it has ever been your burden. You only picked it up accidentally, with a heart too sensitive, too open. And now, you can set them down, not because you care any less, but because you're learning to care rightly. Love isn't a chain, it's a cool breeze. It doesn't bind, it doesn't choke, and the mindful lover is the one who knows when to stay, when to withdraw, when to speak, and when to remain silent. They can touch another's pain like a gentle hand on the shoulder, but they don't become that shoulder to carry it all. They understand that giving love doesn't mean giving away your own peace. You, too, you don't need to be anyone's hero. You don't need to rescue the world. You only need to learn to truly be present, with a heart gentle enough to listen and strong enough not to drown. And sometimes, that mindful presence, it's the greatest gift you can offer. Not with advice, not with action, but with the calm energy of being. Remember that well the teacher showed the young monk. Its water flows every day. It doesn't worry who will come to draw. It doesn't control who will drink. It doesn't dry itself out to please anyone. It simply flows, gently, continually, abundantly. That is also the image you can carry, a soft reminder. You can give, and keep enough to keep flowing. You can love, and retain your own stillness. You can be present, and not lose yourself in another's journey. And then, your love truly becomes healing. Since that day, the young monk no longer viewed helping others through the lens of sacrifice, but through a heart that knows how to gently set boundaries between himself and the world. He still listened, still showed up when others needed him, still remained the one many turned to when they had no one else to talk to, but he no longer carried their sadness home as if it were his own. He let their emotions come, touch, and then pass, like a breeze drifting through the temple courtyard, like a trail of incense floating through the still air, leaving its scent but never leaving a scar. He learned to stand like an old tree, firm, deeply rooted, unmoved by the storm of emotions that rush through other people's lives. Because now, he understood that the person who most needed help was not the one crying, but himself. If his heart had grown too weary to hold love fully, and you, too, you may be so used to being the strong one, the dependable one, the person everyone calls when something goes wrong. But how long has it been since you called your own name? You might still think that feeling tired means you are selfish. That if your love is true, then you would never feel burdened when someone needs you. But true love is not about melting into someone else's life. It is not about draining yourself so they can feel whole. It is about knowing your limits, the line between helping and straining, between listening and absorbing, between loving others and forgetting yourself. Like the sun, shining every day on all things, trees, flowers, even weeds and stones, yet never losing itself. It does not shine for anyone. It does not demand thanks. It simply exists, and its presence is warm enough to ease what is cold, steady enough to keep shining even when the clouds roll in. You can be that kind of light. You do not have to prove your goodness through exhaustion. You do not have to carry every sorrow to be kind. You can be a spring, cool, gentle, flowing, but never draining yourself dry. Because the miracle is, real love never comes from a place of lack. It grows from fullness within, from a heart that knows how to love itself first. Some people go through life believing they must do something grand to be worthy of love. They live in a mindset of giving without limits, only to find themselves adrift in quiet, unspoken losses. They do not realize that emptiness comes not from giving too much, but from not knowing how to keep something for themselves. And then one day, when their silence is no longer heard, when their kindness is not understood, they finally see that they have abandoned themselves in the journey of trying to be there for others. Do not let that happen to you. Do not turn kindness into a burden. Do not make love the price you must pay to feel accepted. You do not need to please anyone to earn your rest. You do not have to play the role of the good person all the time. What you need is just a moment to pause, a deep breath, and a quiet reminder. You, too, deserve to heal. The young monk of long ago learned that lesson when he saw the understanding in his teacher's eyes. When he heard a question that seemed simple yet shook his entire awareness. Why did you drink the whole bucket of someone else's sorrow? And you, right now, are standing before that same question. How many of the pains inside you are truly yours? How many emotions are you carrying just because you thought you had to bear them for someone else? How many times have you said, "I'm fine," while your heart stirred in waves? The truth is, you do not have to be that strong. You can admit that you are tired, that you need a little space of your own. You can let go, not because you no longer care, but because you are learning to love more wisely, more healthily, and from that place of peace. The love you offer will truly have the power to uplift others. Not to rescue them, but to light the way, like a lantern in the night. Not walking the path for them, but helping them see where they can step. We are not here to carry one another's burdens. We meet so we can grow together. And you cannot grow if you keep bowing beneath weights that were never yours to bear. You can only mature when you look up, breathe, and walk with light steps, with a heart still full of love, but no longer tied down. Then, love is no longer exhaustion. It becomes light, It becomes presence, quiet, steady, unconditional, and that is Zen. There is a quiet misunderstanding that has crept into the hearts of many who live with compassion, that to truly love someone, we must walk with them all the way through their pain. We think that only by carrying their feelings in our own hearts can we truly understand them. We believe that if we do not cry with them, worry with them, hurt with them, then our love must be shallow, not deep enough. But slowly, unconsciously, we begin to turn into mirrors reflecting all their suffering. We stop being ourselves, becoming copies of someone else's chaos, their nameless fears, their inner turmoil. We dissolve into other people's emotions like salt in water, and we do not know when we began to blend. We call it empathy, but in truth, we are absorbing. And absorbing is a form of self-harm we do not even notice. True empathy is an open door, through which we glimpse another person's inner world, through which we show up with honest listening, through which we connect with the deeply human in each other. But it never asks us to lose our own boundaries. It never demands that we suffer on their behalf. A mature heart is not one that can endure the most, but one that knows when to draw closer and when to stop. So it does not disappear. Because when you absorb someone else's pain, you do not relieve it, you only add to your own heaviness. And in the end, both of you are lost in a fog of feelings, where no one can see clearly enough to guide the other out of the dark. But when you hold that mindful separation, you are not being cold, you are protecting your inner light. So you still have the strength to shine for others if they need it. Imagine your energy like sunlight. The sun does not choose where it shines. It does not save its best light for the flowers and avoid the weeds. It just shines, calmly, evenly, without asking for anything in return. But do you ever see the sun dim itself on a cloudy day? No, it is still there, silent, steady, and you can be that way too. You can love without straining. You can be present without being paralyzed by someone else's emotions. You can let someone cry in front of you, and instead of holding all their tears in your heart, you can simply stay with them, without judgment, without trying to fix things, without forcing anything to be better. Because sometimes, what people need is not someone to do something, but someone to just be there. In a small village, there was an old woman who lived at the edge of the forest, known as someone who brought peace to anyone who sought her out. People said that after leaving her tiny home, they felt cleansed, lighter, and clearer. Strangely, she did not offer advice, nor did she try to fix anything. She simply sat there, listened, sometimes nodded, sometimes remained silent, and when the person finished speaking, she would just smile and lead them into the garden, pointing to a stream trickling beside a moss-covered stone, or a flower blooming in a clay pot. There was no therapy involved, just the full presence of someone who had learned not to complicate life further by rushing in to interfere. She did not carry anyone's pain into her sleep. She did not turn other people's stories into wounds in her own heart. She let everything come and go, like clouds floating across the sky. And that is precisely what made people feel healed. You can practice in the same way, not by doing anything grand, but by letting go of the belief that you must do something to free others from their suffering. Suffering is an essential part of the path to inner growth. And no matter how much you love someone, you cannot take that process away from them. You can only walk alongside them, with a gentle, unattached presence. When someone is sad, You do not need to become sad with them. When someone panics, you do not need to stir your own inner world to match theirs. Be solid ground for them to stand on. A canopy of shade for them to rest under. A clear stream where they can see their own reflection. But do not be a cracked vessel trying to catch every drop spilling from hearts that are still healing. True compassion does not make you suffer. It does not turn you into someone's shadow. It does not erase you in the role of a savior. On the contrary, it helps you become clear, awake, and spacious enough for love to flow through you like water, unstuck. Without pooling, love like that never runs dry, because it does not come from effort, but from surrender. You do not have to overextend yourself to be good enough. You just need to be present, like a pause in a noisy song, like a deep breath in the rush of life. And from that stillness, you will see, only when you stop absorbing other people's pain can you truly help them heal, not through action, but through the calm energy you embody. Not by dividing their suffering, but by showing them that there is a place within you, untouched by storms, and that they can find that place within themselves too. From this awareness, a new door opens in the hearts of those who once confused compassion with self-harm. When you stop absorbing others' emotions as an automatic reflex, you begin to see a deeper truth. Love is not about carrying someone's burdens, but about keeping yourself light enough to walk with them through rough terrain without being swept away by their emotional currents. This world is not lacking in good people, but it does lack wise ones. We are taught to sacrifice, to share, but rarely are we shown how to protect our own spiritual boundaries. And so, we keep giving instinctively, even when our hearts are weary, our minds stretched thin, our breath shallow. We give until there is nothing left to give, and then blame ourselves for not being able to keep going. We think we were not kind enough. But that is not a flaw. It is a quiet cry for help from a soul that has gone too far. If you have ever felt that way, torn between caring for others and resenting yourself for becoming someone's lifeline without knowing how to float anymore, you are not alone. Many have lived like that for years without realizing they lost their inner freedom. They do not understand why they feel constantly tired, emotionally fragile, and drained every time someone confides in them. They do not see why they carry home emotions that are not theirs, a coworker's frustration, a relative's helplessness, or even a stranger's wounds from a fleeting encounter. They do not know they are living like sponges, soaking up everything around them, both beautiful and dark, without knowing how to release it. And slowly, they break down, bit by bit, under the weight of the unspoken. That is not compassion. That is emotional merging, and it is exactly what Zen teaches us to let go of. In Buddhist teachings, there is a clear distinction between compassion, karuna, and attachment, upadana. Compassion is an open-hearted state, being with someone's pain without being swept away by it. Attachment is when you not only see someone's suffering but claim it as your own, then carry it like a sack of stones, hoping to lighten their load. But the truth is, no one can walk if you insist on carrying their entire path. Sometimes, what people need is not someone to take over, but someone who believes they are strong enough to rise. And to do that, you must remain spacious. You must learn to be like a bell, ringing when needed, silent when needed, but never cracking under the noise of others. Think back to the last time you sat beside someone in pain. Maybe it was a friend in despair, a family member who had lost their way, or a stranger pouring their life story into a brief encounter. How did you respond? Did you find yourself tensing up, searching for the right thing to say, or did you simply stay silent and present? Did your heart tighten with each story told, or did you quietly observe the emotions passing through? Like someone standing at the riverbank watching the current without jumping in? The difference lies in that moment, when you choose between absorbing or being present, between carrying or listening, and in that choice, you decide whether your love becomes a sacrifice or a healing light. You cannot stop others from suffering, just as you cannot take life's lessons for them, but you can become a safe space, a place where others are allowed to be fully themselves. Allowed to be fragile without fear of judgment. Allowed to break without fear of being labeled. And when you hold that groundedness, when you do not get pulled into their emotional storm, you offer them the most precious gift, your full presence. A presence that does not rush to fix, does not try to change, does not push anyone to be better. It just stays, like the earth beneath our feet, the sky above, the breath that continues whether we notice it or not. Zen teaches that true love is not a fire that burns, but a light that shines. Not a blaze that consumes you for the sake of others, but a glow born from inner stillness. When you let go of the habit of emotional absorption, you do not become cold. You are simply learning how to love without losing yourself. And that is the gentlest, deepest, most enduring kind of love. It does not come from sharing someone's pain. It comes from being steady enough to stay with them through it. Not by doing, but by being. Not by rescuing, but by offering a spacious stillness where they can discover their own path through suffering. And it is precisely when you live this way, when you maintain peace amid the emotional tides around you, that you are not only healing others, you are also healing yourself, because you no longer need to be strong in a way that strains you. You no longer have to suffer on behalf of anyone. You get to be yourself, gentle, clear, and quiet enough that every step you take becomes an act of love. No pressure, no exhaustion, no breaking, just a tender presence in the world. Like a small light in the night, not dazzling, but just bright enough for someone passing by to see that peace still exists. And they can find it within themselves too. And when you begin practicing the art of not absorbing other people's emotions, something profoundly beautiful will slowly emerge. You will realize that your peace is not something fragile or easily broken, but rather a hidden spring that constantly flows within. It only becomes muddy when you allow the outside world to enter and overwhelm it. Many people believe that to be truly loving, they must keep their hearts wide open, letting anyone walk in and bring their chaos with them. But true compassion does not require you to abandon your clarity. In fact, it encourages you to be awake enough to clearly see the line between love and self-inflicted pain disguised as love. And when you are awake, you do not shut your heart. You simply know how to open it at the right time. In the right place, to the right people, in the right way, so that the light of love within you is not blown out by the emotional storms outside. You are not closing off, you are just no longer losing yourself. And in that restraint, there is no coldness, only a deep understanding that you too deserve to be protected, cared for, and preserved, just like anyone else. One of the clearest signs that you are absorbing other people's emotions is when your body feels tense after seemingly harmless conversations. Your shoulders feel like they are carrying stones. Your chest tightens with a strange heaviness. Your mind buzzes with thoughts that are not your own. You walk home, but your mind is still stuck in the morning conversation, a sorrowful story from someone, or even the tired eyes of a stranger who sat next to you on the bus. These things cling to you, not because you are weak, but because you forgot to close your energy field after listening. You let compassion exceed the boundaries of wisdom. And so, you end up not only tired from your own burdens, but exhausted from the pain of others, people who may have poured their hearts out and then walked away, leaving you alone with unnamed emotions you never had the chance to release. Emotional absorption turns you into a bottomless container. You keep pouring in empathy, kindness, and understanding, without ever pausing to ask yourself, do I still have enough left? You become the one everyone turns to, but you have no one to lean on yourself. And then, you begin to silently yearn for something you are too afraid to say out loud, that someone will see your weariness. That someone will listen to you the way you've always listened to them. That someone will be gentle with you the way you've been gentle with the whole world. But then comes the disappointment. Because few people realize that the one who always smiles might cry alone at night. The one who always listens also needs a quiet space to hear their own heart. This is why awareness is not just for introverts or for monks in remote mountains. It is for everyone living in the everyday world, loving deeply, and at risk of being worn down by that very love. And then, when you pause, when you begin to return to yourself, you will discover something incredibly gentle. You do not need to carry the entire world. You only need to be steady enough to stand beside someone without being swept away. You only need to slow your breath, quiet your mind, and be able to say, I hear you. I understand you, but I will not carry your pain as my own. That is a very mature form of love, a love that does not cling, does not control, does not dissolve, does not strain. When you love like that, you give others space to grow on their own journeys. You do not invade their pain with the idea that it must be fixed. You simply create a foundation for them to heal themselves. And you do the same for yourself, by sitting quietly beneath the tree of peace you have cultivated over time, not moving, not rushing, not needing anyone's approval. In Zen, there is a concept called selfless compassion, a form of love that is not rooted in ego. That does not center the self. That does not use one's emotions as a measure of another person's worth. When you help someone not because you want to feel good about yourself, but because you genuinely want them to be at peace, you will no longer be attached to whether or not they change, whether or not they thank you, whether or not they listen. You do it because love flows through you like a spring, without reason, without demand, without the desire to become anyone's savior. And in that state, you are free, free from expectation, free from disappointment, free from the trap of goodness that is not grounded in wisdom. You can still be someone who loves deeply, who is generous, who offers peace to weary souls, but you will no longer lose yourself in the process. You will no longer let others' emotions dictate your breath, steal your sleep, or weigh down your days. And at that point, you are no longer just empathetic, you are someone who can lead. Not with words, but with the gentle presence of someone who has learned to hold stillness amid chaos. And that stillness, not loud, not forced, is what makes others feel safest around you. Not because of how well you understand them, but because in your presence, they are allowed to be themselves, without shame, without judgment, without needing to be strong. You become a source, a quiet stream. Not as loud as a mighty river. Not as wild as a waterfall. But steady, subtle, deep. And anyone who touches you carries a little peace with them, without you ever needing to say a word. Because you have not absorbed their emotions. You have simply been present, like a still blue sky. Letting the wind pass. Letting the clouds drift by. Without ever losing yourself. And in that, you are not drained, you are truly radiant. When you live in a state of non-attached compassion, something even deeper begins to shift. Your definition of self-worth. In the past, you may have felt useful when you could do something for someone. When you helped someone through their sadness. When you listened without interrupting. When you held the heavy emotions they could not carry. And so, gradually, you tied your worth to how much you could endure. How much you could sacrifice. How much you could push through for others. But as you awaken, you begin to see that this belief turned you into a trade-off artist, trading peace for usefulness. Clarity for spiritual responsibility. Inner stillness for the identity of being a kind person. You begin to understand that not everyone who gives a lot is living compassionately. And not everyone who suffers in silence is truly at peace. Because kindness, without wisdom, easily becomes a trap that makes you forget your most basic need. To simply be yourself, whole. Complete, not for anyone else, but for you. How many times have you smiled to put someone else at ease, while your own heart felt like a tangled mess? How many times have you said, "It's okay," just to help someone feel lighter? Even though no one has ever asked you, "Are you alright?" How many times have you tried to keep everyone around you happy, only to end up being the one sighing quietly in the dark? Maybe you have lived like that for so long that you no longer realize it is a quiet form of injustice. No one forced you to live this way. But you, deep in your subconscious, chose to take on that role because you were afraid you would no longer be useful if you stopped. But you do not need to prove you are a good person by wearing yourself out. You do not have to strain yourself to be the pillar of support for the whole world when your own legs are already weary. And if today, you are brave enough to set that burden down, no one has the right to blame you. Because the truth is, you were not born to be the shelter for every emotional storm that others bring. You were born to learn how to love with boundaries, to be present without dissolving, to be compassionate without sacrificing yourself. That is not an easy journey. It requires you to relearn how to love, how to give, and how to hold peace in your soul even when the world around you is in chaos. You must face the guilt that comes with saying no for the first time. You must endure the surprised, even disappointed looks from people who are used to you always saying yes. You must learn to be silent without feeling heartless. You must learn not to respond immediately to someone's sorrow, not because you do not care, but because you are choosing to respond with maturity instead of emotion. You must learn how to step away from a conversation you know will pull you into a whirlwind of unnecessary emotion, even when the other person is pleading for you to stay. You must learn how to protect your own energy, because if you do not, you will keep being a good person to the point of getting lost from yourself, lost from peace, and ultimately, lost from the true meaning of love. And through that unlearning, you will begin to discover something truly beautiful, that when you stop absorbing other people's emotions, the love you offer becomes purer, lighter, and more effortless, because it is no longer colored by the need to be helpful. to do something, to be someone. It is simply a gentle flow from a very quiet place within you. A place where you do not need to try. You only need to be present. And the strange thing is, when love is no longer burdened by expectations or false responsibility, the person receiving it also feels more at ease. They do not feel pressured to get better to deserve your care. They do not feel indebted. They simply feel safe, in a space without judgment, without fixes, without the need to hold back their tears. They get to be themselves. And so do you. Because when you love without absorbing, you are truly loving from an awakened heart. A heart no longer blurred by someone else's tears, but clear like a still lake, where others can see themselves reflected without muddying the calm. A heart that does not chase, does not cling, does not need to fix, just stays there. Whole, grounded, open, and that is enough. Because in life, sometimes people do not need to be saved. They just need someone beside them, who does not panic, does not recoil from emotion, does not rush to give advice. Someone who stands still like a mountain peak, letting them know the storm will pass. Someone as quiet as the morning light, reminding them that after every long night, a gentle sun is always waiting. Someone who does nothing, and yet makes everything feel lighter, simply because their presence is peace. You can be that person, not by changing who you are, but by letting go. Let go of burdens that were never yours. Let go of the belief that you must be the one who carries everything. Let go of the habit of stretching yourself to rescue others from their own emotions. Let go of the perfectly kind person, persona, and return to your real self, unpolished, honest, not needing to be flawless. And when you return to that place, where your heart gets to just be a heart, not a shield, not a warehouse for emotions, you will truly understand what it means to love without heaviness, to help without exhaustion, to be present without losing yourself. And perhaps that is the highest form of compassion, a kind of love that sets boundaries with love, not with fear, a love that does not lead you astray, but guides you deeper into yourself, so that from that place, you can step out into the world, not to save anyone, but to gently remind them, they too can heal, if they are quiet enough to hear themselves. But to live in non-attached love, to stop absorbing other people's emotions as an exhausted reflex, you need one essential thing: the ability to turn inward, to observe yourself, not to fix, to judge, or to criticize, but to observe as if sitting before a still lake, watching each ripple rise and fade without chasing it or resisting it. That kind of observation, free from the conditioned urge to react, free from the roles you have carried, free from the old stories you once believed, will gradually return you to your truest essence. A place not stained by the past, not clouded by future worries. A place that is you, pure, spacious, complete, and from there, you begin to see clearly. Most of what you used to absorb from others was not because you loved too much, but because you had not yet seen the fear within yourself. The fear of not being loved if you are not helping. The fear of being left behind if you do not do something useful. The fear that if you do not hurt with others, you must be heartless. But when you face those fears with quiet, honest observation, they begin to dissolve, and you no longer need to live according to other people's emotional weather. Observation frees you from the addiction to react. You no longer rush in when someone else is in pain. You no longer throw yourself into their chaos just because you cannot stand to see it. You learn to sit still, breathe slowly, and watch emotions like passing clouds. When someone spills their sorrow into the space between you, you no longer quietly open your heart to carry it. You simply listen, notice, recognize, and let it flow past like a stream. Between you and the world, a soft cushion begins to form, not indifference, but the mist of awareness. And that mist is what keeps you from being soaked by other people's emotional downpour. Strangely, the other person feels lighter too, because they no longer feel like a burden. When you do not absorb, you do not make them feel guilty for sharing. They can feel your presence with them, but not drowning in them. And that is a grounded presence, non-demanding, non-intrusive, but full of love. Zen teaches that we are not what we feel. We are simply the one witnessing those feelings pass through. That seemingly simple statement is the key to stepping out of the role of the emotional absorber. Because the moment you start believing that someone else's emotions are a part of you, you get pulled into them and lose your boundaries. But if you simply observe, this person is sad. This emotion is moving through me. I feel heavy. But I am not that heaviness. You begin to step out of the whirlpool. You no longer sink to the bottom. You begin to rise, not through resistance, but through clarity. And when you see clearly, you become transparent, not because you are empty, but because you do not hold on to anything. Everything arrives, you notice it, then let it go. Every unfamiliar emotion, you breathe, then release. You do not need to resist others. You just need not to hold on to what does not belong to you. And in doing so, you return to being a river, still flowing through many lands. Still receiving fallen leaves, but never holding on to anything long enough to muddy the water. Observation is also the path that brings you back to your natural rhythm. When you live by others' emotions, you are often pulled out of your own tempo. You sleep at the wrong times, eat at odd hours, and your thoughts become clouded. You lose touch with your intuition because you are living by someone else's breath. But when you begin to observe, you slowly return to your own spiritual rhythm. You know when to step forward, and when to step back. You know when to speak, and when to stay silent. You recognize when a conversation has reached its limit, and when you are getting caught in a loop of emotional repetition. Observation stops you from reacting out of old habits. You no longer say, yes, when your heart wants to say, no. You no longer smile when your heart is weary. You no longer hold someone just because you are afraid they will leave if you say no. You live more truthfully, not through your words, but through your energy. The energy of someone awake enough not to get lost in others' emotions, but compassionate enough not to turn away from their pain. And most importantly, when you practice observing long enough, you do not just see other people's emotions clearly, you begin to see yourself clearly. You recognize old wounds that made you overly sensitive to the emotions around you. You recall childhood memories, when you had to hold it together to calm the adults, to ease the tension in your home, to be the good one far too early. You understand that the reflex to absorb was never your fault. It was a survival mechanism you once learned to receive love. And then, you stop blaming yourself. You begin to embrace the child inside, the child who once believed that to belong, they had to suffer with others. You tell that child, it is okay now. We are grown. We do not need to do that anymore. And that child nods softly within you. then nestles into your chest, and finally sleeps, after a very long journey. And so, you stop absorbing, not because you have become hard, but because you have become gentle with yourself. Gentle enough not to allow anyone to harm you, not even you. Gentle enough to know that the peace in your heart is the greatest gift you can offer the world, not exhaustion from unmindful love. And when you live this way, every step you take, every glance you share, every word you speak becomes a quiet reminder to others that they do not have to absorb others' emotions to be kind, that they can love and still stay true to themselves, that they can be compassionate without trading away their inner freedom, and that, truly, is a way of living worth choosing every single day. When you are patient with yourself, walking with gentle awareness, you will realize that emotions, no matter where they come from, are always temporary. They are like waves on the surface of the sea. None of them last forever. None keep the same form over time. But if you do not observe, if you absorb the wave the moment it rises, you will feel like you are drifting endlessly, not knowing where the shore is. Observation frees you from being a victim of emotion, not because you avoid it, but because you understand its nature. And when you see its nature, you stop clinging. Someone may come to you, crying, sharing their suffering, and you will listen, deeply, sincerely, but within you, there remains a vast inner space, enough to hold everything without being overwhelmed. You are present, but not dissolved. You feel, but do not cling. You show up, but do not disappear. That is the sign of someone who has mastered the art of living with emotion without being drowned by it. The wonderful part is, when you practice deep observation, you not only free yourself from absorbing others' emotions, you also release old feelings that have been buried inside you. Maybe in the past, you lived with someone deeply unstable, a father who was angry, a mother who was depressed, a partner who was fragile, and because you never learned to separate, you carried their emotions for years. They built up like thick mud at the bottom of your being. But now, with observation, you begin to see each layer rise, not as something pulling you down anymore, but as something you can clearly see, name, and release. You begin to understand, I have lived someone else's life for too long. And then you exhale gently. You stop blaming them. You stop blaming yourself. You simply see, and in that seeing, you let go. From there, you step into a new state of freedom. The freedom to be close to others while still being yourself. It sounds like a paradox. But when you stop absorbing emotions, you can actually be more connected. Because that closeness is no longer driven by burden. It is not based on duty, or fear of disappointing, or the need to be loved. It is a natural presence, like two rivers flowing side by side. Not merging into each other. Not trying to become one, but still making their way to the same ocean. You can sit beside someone and not have to do anything. No need for comforting words. No need for forced advice. No need to put on a sympathetic face. You simply show up, and your presence becomes a quiet miracle. Because when you do not absorb, you do not reflect chaos back at the person in pain. You become a clear mirror, unjudging, undistorted, free of your own color. The person in front of you looks into you and sees themselves, raw, whole, unbroken, and that helps them heal, in their own way, without depending on you. And in that mindfulness, you begin to understand something else that matters deeply. You cannot control anyone's life. No matter how deeply you love someone, no matter how much you want their happiness, they still have to walk through their pain on their own. You can love someone to your core, but you cannot suffer for them. You cannot grow up for them. And if you try to, you only pull them away from the lesson they need, and wear yourself down in the process. Observation helps you let go of the urge to interfere. It helps you stay in your rightful place, not as a burden bearer, but as a companion, not as someone who gets lost, but as someone who sees clearly. Someone who loves purely, without grasping, without conditions. And when you stay in your rightful place, you are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer in pain because you could not help, because you could not stop them, because they would not change. You simply keep loving by living your life fully, keeping your own light bright, and allowing them the space to rediscover the light within themselves. And finally, though perhaps most essentially, observation is what helps you become whole. Not whole because your wounds are gone, but because you no longer fight them. You allow them to be there. You see them, you smile at them, and you let them go when the time comes. That wholeness does not come from always being at peace, but from no longer being afraid of the moments when you are not. And from there, you can truly walk alongside others peacefully. Not in the sense of, I will carry this for you, but, I am here. And I will not leave, but I will not lose myself. Not, you are suffering, so I must suffer too. But, you are in pain. And I still hold ease in my heart, so that if you need it, I can be a place where you can pause and breathe. Not, I must do something to help, but my presence, steady and unattached, is already what helps. And when you live that way, lightly, clearly, lovingly, without sacrificing, you will begin to see that the world does not need you to become anything at all. The world just needs you to be yourself, awake, gentle, and grounded, and that is enough. But sometimes, just as you begin to create healthy distance from the emotions of others, you will encounter a harsh truth. Not everyone will welcome this new version of you. A version that is no longer easily swayed. No longer always saying yes. No longer rushing to soothe or fix everything. Some people will call you cold. Some will say, you've changed. Some may feel abandoned because they no longer receive the reactions they were used to. And perhaps, you too will feel confused in those early days of awakening, when you are not yet familiar with being with someone without absorbing. Not yet used to the inner stillness after so long living in emotional chaos borrowed from others. But if you are patient enough to keep walking, to hold steady in observation, you will see that this change does not distance you from others, it brings you closer to yourself. And from that place, you become more honest, more peaceful, and clearer in every relationship. You begin to discern what true empathy is, and what is just emotional enmeshment disguised as understanding. You realize that some relationships have been sustained not by mutual care, but by one-sided effort, where you were the one always enduring, listening, fixing, and so you never felt safe expressing your own exhaustion. But as you learn to observe and preserve your own energy, you also begin setting boundaries. You learn how to say no. Learn when to end a conversation that is draining you. Learn not to immediately respond to long, emotional messages when your mind is not clear. Learn to step back from even the deepest connection if it is pulling you too far away from your own inner balance. And maybe, those decisions will make you feel guilty at first, but eventually, You realize that true kindness does not come from guilt, but from integrity with your own peace. Gradually, you discover something even more powerful, that when you stop absorbing emotions, you also stop creating emotional karma. Because every time you take on someone else's sadness, anger, or resentment as if it were your own, you are adding another layer of unrest to your own energy field. These emotions do not simply disappear, unless you consciously process and dissolve them. And if they are not yours to begin with, carrying them without clarity only makes you heavy, confused, and directionless. Observation is the key to ending that cycle. It helps you see, this is not my emotion. I am feeling it, but I am not it. And with that one small shift, you move from being a victim of other people's feelings to being a mindful presence amid the currents of human emotion. And that role, that grounded presence, is the true source of someone who brings peace to others, without needing to say a word. Because peace is not something you create through effort. It is a natural state that arises when you stop getting pulled into what is not yours. It appears when you become spacious enough to listen without absorbing. When you can sit beside someone crying, and your breath remains calm, your gaze soft, your heart unshaken. When you can hear harsh words and not take them in, not ruminate on them all night, not respond with anger or defensiveness. When you can witness your loved ones wrestle with their pain, and still trust in their path, without intervening, without dragging them toward you, without hurting on their behalf. That is peace, a steadiness not dependent on circumstances, a silence full of strength, a stepping back that is not withdrawal. And within that peace, you are not just holding energy for yourself. You become a spiritual refuge for those who are awake enough to feel it. And then, one day, you sit alone in a quiet space. No one needs you. No one is pouring their story into your lap. And you realize that you are still whole, still light, still not empty. You no longer need to carry someone else's feelings to feel worthy. You no longer need to help someone to feel loved. You no longer define yourself as the one who always listens. Because you have listened enough, not to others, but to yourself, you begin to understand that peace is not found in silence around you, but in clarity within you. And from that place, you walk out into the world, not carrying others' burdens, not denying their pain, but no longer letting anyone pull your soul into a journey that is not yours to take. You live, slowly, fully, knowing who you are, where you are going, and what is truly worth carrying in your heart. That is freedom. Freedom is not about walking away from everyone to live alone. It is about being able to stand among thousands of people, each one emotional, angry, confused, and still keep your heart as still as a lake. Able to reflect, but not to hold, and in that, you become truly yourself, not the version someone else needs. Not a product shaped by others' emotions, but you, pure, gentle, and as profound as moonlight shining through a forest at night. The hardest part of releasing the habit of absorbing others' emotions is facing those you love the most, your family, your partner, your closest friends, the ones you once believed you must cling to, must understand completely, must share every feeling with to prove real love. You were taught that to love is to never leave, to be there for every storm, to laugh and cry together, to suffer and celebrate side by side. And so, many times, you crossed the line of emotional balance, letting their inner turmoil flood your own mind, not just because you loved them, but because you believed you had to in order to preserve the bond. But what you did not see was, when you let others' emotions rush in like a flood without boundaries, you were slowly losing yourself. You became a container, not a companion. You became a shadow in someone else's story, not the main character in your own life. And then, you found that the relationships that seemed the deepest were actually the ones that made you the most tired, the most drained, the most sad, simply because you could no longer tell the difference between love and emotional fusion. Practicing Zen, or more accurately, practicing mindfulness in each relationship, does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. On the contrary, it requires immense courage to remain true to yourself while standing beside the people you love. Courage to remain steady when someone else is angry. Courage not to be swept away when someone else is grieving. Courage to say, "I hear you, but I cannot carry this pain for you," without feeling guilty. Courage to step out of a heavy conversation, even when you know the other person deeply needs someone to stay. And perhaps the greatest courage of all is to believe that real love does not require the sacrifice of self to survive. Real love still endures, even when you step back to breathe, to protect your peace, to guard the quiet sky within your own heart. And if a relationship cannot accept that, then perhaps it was never built on true love, but rather on emotional dependence. Dressed in beautiful words, you will see this clearly in the days when you begin setting boundaries. The people who truly love you will honor your stillness. They will not demand a reaction. They will not pressure you to always be there. They will not require you to suffer with them to prove you care. They will thank you for keeping your inner light burning, because that light, even without words, is a place they can return to in the dark nights of life. On the other hand, those who do not understand will begin to criticize, to pressure, to make you feel like the villain, just because you chose to preserve your energy. But remember this: you were not born to carry everything. You were not born to be an unlimited dumping ground for anyone's emotions. You were born to live, to breathe, to feel each moment with a whole heart, not a heart fractured by emotions that were never yours. And then, as you live long enough in that mindfulness, you begin to notice a quiet but powerful transformation. You no longer need others to understand you the way you once did. In the past, maybe you longed for someone to understand you, to acknowledge your kindness, to see the silent sacrifices you made. But now, you begin to realize, you do not need others to see. You only need to see yourself. You do not need anyone to comfort you. Because you have become gentle with yourself. You do not need gratitude. Because you are no longer giving to get something in return. And most importantly, you no longer use others' emotions to measure your strength. Someone might be angry, disappointed, or dissatisfied, but that does not mean you are wrong. That does not mean you need to change just to make them happy. You begin to listen to all of it the way you would listen to the wind, not pulled, not entangled, simply present. And what a miracle it is, when you live this way. Your relationships naturally refine themselves. Those who are not aligned will quietly drift away, no fights, no drama. Those who stay are the ones who truly accept you, without needing you to exhaust yourself, without expecting you to always respond exactly how they want, without demanding you uphold the image of a perfectly kind person. These connections, though fewer, run deeper. And in those relationships, you are no longer a glass filled to the brim, always about to overflow, but a spring that knows when to flow and when to rest. No longer the keeper of fire for an entire village, but the gentle morning sun, quiet, soft, but still warm enough to bring someone back to life. You do not need to prove it, because you, in your stillness and your non-absorption, are already the most healing presence there is. At last, you return to yourself, not as someone who once carried the emotions of the world, but as someone who has just relearned how to live without escaping, but also without clinging, to live not with indifference, but without dissolving, to live with a heart that stays open, but guarded gently by mindfulness. That heart still loves, still feels, still empathizes, but no longer loses itself. That heart is no longer driven by the expectations of others, but nourished by inner clarity. And from that place, every relationship you hold becomes more genuine, more free, more profound. No one carries another. No one saves another. There are only two people, each walking their own journey, meeting at the crossroads of awareness, touching with eyes of understanding, and walking together, not out of need, but out of respect for the peace within each other. And in that way, you are not just healing, you are truly living. And then, in that silence, you come to understand a lesson that seems simple, but takes many wounds to fully realize. Not every love nurtures. And not every relationship is worth sacrificing your peace for. There are people to whom you have given your entire heart. You have listened to all their tears. You have stretched yourself to the point of having no energy left to come back to yourself, and still, they feel it is not enough. Not because they are bad people, but because they carried too much unhealed pain. And unconsciously, they begin to treat you as an unconditional support beam, as a post to lean on, as someone who must always be there, because they have not learned how to be there for themselves. But you cannot be anyone's savior. If you keep reaching to pull someone who is drowning while you do not yet know how to swim, both of you will sink. Real love is not rescue. It is keeping your light steady long enough so that, when they are ready, they can find their way back. And if they cannot, that is not your fault. Light is never to blame when someone chooses to keep their eyes closed. Once you have burned out enough times from holding what was never yours to carry, you begin to learn how to ask a vital question before reacting to anyone. Is this feeling truly mine? Just that one question is enough to pause, to look deeper, to keep you from diving into an emotional storm you were never meant to fight. Because if you do not stop, the cycle will repeat. You will try to please someone who is unsettled. Take the blame again. Act composed once more. Fall asleep with the weight of someone else's anger. But if you begin to see clearly, they are sad, they are hurt, they are panicking, then you can stay. But no longer as the boat dragged into the waves. You are the rock beneath the river. The waves may crash over you, but they no longer sweep you away. And in that steadiness, you no longer fear that, if I do not react, they will leave, because now you understand. If someone leaves you just because you do not absorb their emotions, then perhaps that was never a healthy connection to begin with, and you no longer need to hold on to anything that brings you turmoil. The outside world may remain unchanged, people still suffer, still rage, still feel insecure, but your inner world has transformed. It is no longer a field that anyone can disturb. No longer a mirror that absorbs every image. No longer a place hanging countless emotional threads connecting you unconditionally to others. You have begun to be selective. Selective about who is allowed into your energy space. Selective about which words you listen to and which noises you let go. Selective about when to be deeply present and when to step back. This is not selfish, it is wisdom. Just as you choose healthy food for your body, why not choose healthy emotions for your mind? If someone continuously vents their anger on you, uses insecurity to manipulate you, forces you to shrink yourself just to make them comfortable, then that is no longer love. It is control, and you deserve to walk away to protect your inner freedom, because nothing is more precious than a peaceful heart. There may be days when you feel lonely. Lonely because you no longer play the role of the one who listens to everything. Lonely because you are no longer the place where everyone pours their chaos. Lonely because nobody calls you at midnight to cry, complain, blame. But remember, this kind of loneliness is far healthier than living among crowds while losing yourself. Befriending loneliness is the first step toward befriending yourself. Only when you can truly sit with yourself, without needing consolation or empathy, do you find what you have been chasing in the eyes of others all your life: fullness. Wholeness does not come from someone else's love, it comes from the love you dare to give yourself. Even when no one understands, defends, or stays. And from that fullness, you no longer give the same way. You do not give out of fear of losing. You do not give to be loved. You do not give to fulfill a role. You give because you have. You give naturally, like a flowing river. You give without needing acknowledgement. You give without feeling depleted. And you learn how to not give without guilt. Not answering when your spirit is cluttered. Not replying when your mind is unclear. Not meeting when you know the conversation will drain your vitality. Not saying yes just to make others comfortable. Because you understand, if kindness hurts you, it is not kindness, it is self-destruction, adorned in moral elegance, and you do not need to be a perfectly kind person to be accepted. You only need to be honest with your emotions, your limits, and your growing mindfulness. The deeper you go, the more you understand that everything has limits, even kindness. Not because you do not love enough, but because you are beginning to love rightly. Love is not about carrying someone else's sorrow, but about preserving stillness in your heart, so that when someone looks at you, they are reminded, there is another way of living. A way that does not chase emotions. That does not suck others into your suffering. That does not rely on someone else to bear your pain. A way that depends on inner strength, where you can feel pain. Without losing yourself, you can be sad. Without losing your light, you can love someone, while keeping your own untouchable sky. And when you live like that, you no longer have to prove anything. Your presence, simply by being unabsorbed and peaceful, is its own answer. A silent affirmation: I am here, yet I do not dissolve. I love, yet I do not sacrifice. I walk together, yet do not get lost. And that is enough. Then, amidst all the letting go, during those days when you learn to quietly stand apart from others' emotions, you will begin to hear more clearly the quiet voice within yourself, the voice once drowned out by other people's tears. Their endless pleas, the expectations that you must always be okay, always good, always there. It is the voice of your pure inner self. A deep part of you that knows what is real, what is enough, what to hold, and what to let go. That voice is not loud. It does not roar like fear or demand like old habits. It only whispers, in early mornings before you are fully awake. in the pause during busyness, in the look you give yourself in the mirror. It asks, are you living for yourself yet? And sometimes, you realize, you have been living for others' emotions, for their approval, for the roles they put on you like one-size-fits-all clothing. You tried to please, to yield, to carry, to forgive so deeply that you forgot boundaries, and you called it love. But now, you are learning, quietly and courageously, that love does not require self-sacrifice to prove itself. Love does not need to resolve someone else's pain to show its depth. Love can sometimes be stepping back. It can be a sigh and a choice to breathe. It can be allowing yourself to rest, even when someone still expects you to carry on. It can be choosing not to respond to a long, negative message. It can be being still when someone demands you react, respond, or collapse with them. And in those moments, you discover you remain whole, no less than before, but even clearer, brighter, more full, because you no longer use your exhaustion as proof of your capacity to love. That mindfulness shifts the way you show up. You are no longer the one who always says yes, always shows up regardless. Instead, you show up by choice, by awareness, by responsibility for your own peace. You no longer stay in conversations that muddy your heart just out of fear of judgment. You no longer remain with someone holding you hostage with negativity. You no longer force yourself to be the rescuer in someone else's story. Instead, you listen to your body, mind, soul, and then choose to stay or to leave, to open or to close, to speak or to be silent. Not because you must, but because you want to. Not because you fear, but because you understand. Not by habit, but out of self-respect. In that journey, you also realize, the only one you are truly responsible for your whole life is yourself. Not your parents, not your partner, not your children, not your friends, not anyone who ever leaned on your shoulder in despair. Whoever called you saying, without you, I do not know how to live. All of them, no matter how much you love them, are living lives of their own, learning their own lessons, responsible for their own choices. You cannot live for them. You cannot learn for them. You cannot suffer for them. And if you keep trying, you leave no room for your own journey. You will grow old with silent resentment, because nobody truly knows how much you sacrificed. You will lose the sweetness in every moment, because your heart is always filled with others' unprocessed emotions. You will always feel incomplete, no matter how much you give, for you never truly gave to yourself. But when you choose to return, to let go, to keep a clean part of yourself, you will find each day becomes lighter. No more waking up startled by midnight messages. No more feeling compelled to save someone. No more guilt in saying no. You begin to befriend silence. Embrace afternoons that require no explanation. Welcome evenings where you simply place a hand on your chest, close your eyes, and ask, am I okay? And even if the answer is sometimes not yet, it is honest, without pressure, without hiding behind someone else, without needing to react, just being present. That is enough. The outside world may not change, people still suffer, still get angry, still feel uneasy, but your inner world has transformed. It is no longer a field for others to plow, no longer a mirror that absorbs every image, and no longer a place where countless emotional threads hang, tying you unconditionally to others. You have started to be selective about who may enter your energetic space, Selective about which words to hear and which noises to let go. Selective about when to be deeply present and when to step away. This is not selfish, it is wisdom. Just as you choose nourishing food for your body, why not choose nourishing emotions for your mind? If someone consistently unloads their anger on you, uses insecurity to manipulate you, or forces you to shrink yourself just to keep them comfortable, then that is not love. It is control, and you deserve to step away to protect your inner freedom, because nothing is more precious than a peaceful heart. There may be days when you feel lonely. Lonely because you no longer play the role of always listening. Lonely because you are no longer the dumping ground for everyone's chaos. Lonely because nobody calls you at midnight to cry, complain, or blame. But remember, this kind of loneliness is far healthier than living among crowds while losing yourself. Befriending loneliness is the first step to befriending yourself. Only when you can truly sit with yourself, without needing consolation or empathy, do you discover what you have spent your life hunting in the eyes of others: fullness. Fulfillment does not come from someone else's love. It comes from the love you dare to give yourself. Even when no one understands, defends, or stays, from that fullness, you no longer give the way you once did. You no longer give out of fear of losing. You no longer give to be loved. You no longer give to fulfill an assigned role. You give because you can. You give naturally, like a flowing river. You give without seeking acknowledgement. You give without feeling depleted. And you learn to not give without guilt. Not answering when your heart is cluttered. Not replying when your mind is unclear. Not meeting when you know the conversation will drain your vitality. Not saying yes just to appease someone. Because you understand, if kindness hurts you, it is not kindness. It is self-destruction in a moral disguise. And you do not need to be a perfectly kind person to be accepted. You only need to be honest with your emotions, your limits, and your evolving mindfulness. As you go deeper, you understand that everything has limits, even kindness. Not because you do not love enough, but because you are beginning to love rightly. Love is not about carrying someone else's sorrow. It is about preserving calm within your heart so that when someone looks at you, they see another way of living. A way that does not chase emotions. That does not pull others into your suffering. That does not rely on someone else to carry your pain. A way rooted in inner strength, where you can feel pain but remain yourself. You can feel sorrow but not lose your light. You can love someone yet maintain your own untouchable space. And when you live like that, you never need to prove anything. Your presence, as simple, unabsorbed, peaceful, is already enough. It is a silent declaration. I am here, yet I do not dissolve. I love, yet I do not sacrifice. I walk with others, yet I remain intact. That is enough. And then, amid all the letting go, during these days of standing quietly apart from others' emotions, you begin to hear more clearly the quiet voice within yourself. The voice that was once drowned out by the cries of others. Their endless pleas, and the pressure that you must always be okay. Always good, always present. It is the voice of your pure inner self. A deep part of you that knows what is real, what is enough, what to hold on to, and what to release. That voice does not roar like fear, or demand like old habits. It only whispers, in early mornings before you are fully awake. In the pause amid your busyness. In the look you give yourself in the mirror. It asks, are you truly living for yourself? And sometimes you realize you have been living for others' emotions, for their approval, for roles assigned to you like one-size-fits-all clothing. You tried to please, to yield, to carry, to forgive so deeply that you forgot your own boundaries, and you called it love. But now you are learning, quietly and bravely, that love does not have to sacrifice itself to prove its depth. Love does not need to solve someone else's pain to show its authenticity. Love can sometimes be stepping away. It can be a single sigh and a decision to take a step back. It can be saying no to yourself in the midst of someone who still wants you to carry on. It can be choosing not to reply to a long, negative message. It can be staying still when someone demands your reaction, asks for your response, or wants you to collapse with them. And in those moments, you find yourself whole again, no less. And in fact clearer, brighter, more full, because you no longer use your exhaustion as evidence that you have loved well. This mindfulness transforms how you show up. You no longer say yes to everything, no matter the cost. Instead, you show up with choice, awareness, and responsibility for your own peace. You no longer stay in conversations that muddy your heart out of fear of judgment. You no longer remain tied to someone causing you harm. You no longer force yourself into the story of someone else as their rescuer. Instead, you listen to your body, your mind, your soul, and then choose to stay or to leave, to open or to close, to speak or to remain silent. Not because you must, but because you want to. Not out of fear, but because you understand. Not out of habit, but out of self-respect. On this journey, you also begin to understand the only person you are truly responsible for a lifetime is yourself, not your parents, not your partner, not your children, not your friends, not anyone who ever cried on your shoulder in despair, called you saying, "Without you, I do not know how to live." They all, no matter how much you love them, are living their own life, learning their own lessons, and responsible for their own choices. You cannot live for them. You cannot learn in their place. You cannot suffer for them. And if you keep trying, you leave no room for your own journey. You will grow old with silent resentment. No one truly knows how much you have sacrificed. You will lose the sweetness of each moment, because your heart is filled with unprocessed emotions of others. You will always feel empty, despite giving so much, because you never truly gave to yourself. But when you choose to come home, to let go, to preserve a piece of purity within yourself, you will find each day suddenly feels lighter. You no longer wake startled by late-night messages. You no longer feel compelled to save someone. You no longer carry guilt for saying no. You begin to find friendship with silence, with afternoons that need no explanation, with evenings spent placing your hand on your chest, closing your eyes, and asking, "Am I okay?" And even if the answer is sometimes not yet, it is honest, without pressure, without hiding behind someone else, without needing to react, just being present. That is enough. Gradually, you begin to see everyone around you with different eyes. Before, you might have quickly labeled someone as negative, someone else as selfish, another as difficult, and yet another as insensitive. But now, you simply see, they are also in pain. They, too, were once children who felt abandoned. They, too, have had days when they wanted to scream but remained silent. They, too, have wounds they cannot name. And because they do not know how to heal, they inadvertently wound others, including you. Observation helps you to see this, not so you continue to endure or excuse them, but so you stop reacting. You no longer need to force yourself to forgive. You do not need to pretend to be noble. You simply see, and from that seeing, all judgment dissolves. You may choose not to walk with them anymore, yet you step away without resentment. You may stop talking to them, yet your heart remains peaceful in reflection. They may no longer seek you, yet you no longer feel abandoned, because observation has taught you. Nobody truly leaves you if you do not leave yourself. From this place of observation, you begin to be fully present in each moment. When you eat, you truly eat. When you walk, you truly walk. When you speak, you truly listen. You are no longer distracted by what has passed or anxious about what is coming. You live in the present, not as a slogan, but as a natural state. You stop multitasking. You stop rushing through tasks just to move on to the next. You realize there is nowhere else to go beyond this moment. There is no one else to become beyond the person you are right here, right now. And in that moment, you begin to see the sacred in small things: a warm cup of tea, a gentle glance, an instrumental melody, an unexpected shower. You do not need to go to a temple, climb a mountain, or visit the sea. You can still touch profound stillness, because that stillness is inside you. Always there, waiting for you to pause long enough to notice. Then something wonderful happens. You begin to trust yourself, deeply and unconditionally. No longer is your trust based on achievement, appearance, or external approval. Instead, you have a steadfast belief you can weather anything. As long as you breathe, observe, and stay connected to your inner awareness. You no longer wobble at praise or criticism. You are not manipulated by external promises. You are no longer confused by choices, because you have learned to turn inward for answers, not logic or book knowledge, but answers from silence, from the quiet depths within your soul, where there is no right or wrong, only clarity. And that clarity, once established as your foundation, will guide you. No matter how turbulent the world may become, at that point, you truly understand why Zen masters say, your mind is like a mirror. Just wipe off the dust, and you will see things as they are. In the past, you may have used that mirror to reflect others, to understand them, to help them, to change them, but now, you simply want to wipe dust off your own mirror. Because you know, if your mind is clear, the world appears clear. If your sight is bright, so is your environment. If your heart is still, even in the clamor of others, you still see their beauty. And if you persist in keeping your mirror unclouded, not by expectations, not by excess emotions, not by outside voices, then you will not only see clearly, but help others see themselves through your reflection. That is the greatest gift of observation. You become a source of illumination, not to judge, but to awaken, not to criticize, but to remind, not to control, but to inspire. You no longer need to speak excessively. You do not need to convince anyone to believe in the life you are living. You just need to keep observing, keep living honestly, keep preserving inner stillness, and like a lamp, you will naturally shine, not because anyone is looking, but because your presence is the light, a light that is not blinding, not noisy, not flamboyant, but quiet, profound, and enduring. And in that light, all things become enough. Not lacking, not excessive, not requiring anything more. And so, with each day spent patiently observing your inner world, you begin to notice something oddly familiar. The outer world seems to shift, not because it has actually changed, but because your perception has. Things that once irritated you are now little ripples that cannot disturb your calm. Harsh words that once robbed you of sleep now pass like a breeze. The unpleasant behavior of someone you once found intolerable now becomes understandable, because you deeply understand this. People are merely reflecting pains they cannot yet name. You no longer feel compelled to solve anyone, to fix anyone, or to be understood. You no longer expect others to be delicate, kind, or responsive in the way you expect. You stop hoping the world will match your desires in order to be at peace. And through that letting go, you discover a rare freedom. Freedom from expectations, from disappointment, from emotional turbulence caused by things beyond your control. Observation is no longer an action, it becomes a life instinct. You do not need reminders to wake up or alarms that say, turn inward. Because you are living it as naturally as breathing, quietly, effortlessly, without strain. You may be in a crowded street, but your heart remains as calm as a mirrored lake. You may face challenges, but inside you maintain a space of clarity where you can always return. And the miracle is, from that place, you begin to perceive the meaning of life more clearly. You no longer feel like a small being within a vast universe. You feel like a part of the whole, a tiny thread woven into a larger tapestry. Every action you take, whether in a glance, a sigh, or a step, creates impact, leaves a vibration. You do not need to do something big to feel valuable. It is enough to be fully present in each small moment. That alone is your contribution to the world's harmony. And when you live that way, what comes to you begins to shift. The people you meet, whether by chance, bring messages you have long needed to hear. The book you open seems to stop at exactly the page that speaks to your concerns. Events that seemed random become opportunities to understand another layer of your consciousness. You live not by chasing outcomes, but by allowing life to come as a dance. You simply arrive, observe, and step to its rhythm. You no longer fear uncertainty. You no longer need every plan to be perfect or every path to be clear. Because you see now, what matters is not the destination, but the quality of your presence with each step you take. Sometimes you stop, not because you are tired, but because you understand. Stopping is part of movement. You stop to listen. You stop to absorb meaning. You stop so you are not swept away by a pace that is too fast, too rushed, too noisy. In that moment, you no longer fear silence. You even grow to love it, as an old friend. Silence is no longer a sign of loneliness or being lost. It is a cool porch at midday. A stretch of forest where you can breathe deeply without being overwhelmed by expectations and roles. In that silence, you begin to hear the true heartbeat of life, not through honking horns, not through hurried phone calls, but through the soft movements of existence, the drip of water, the rustle of leaves, the flight of a bird across the rooftop at dusk. Each sound becomes a sutra. Each moment becomes a teaching. No need for a teacher. No need for doctrine. You only need enough stillness to listen. And in that very observation, you begin to see the true nature of suffering. That suffering does not lie in what happens, but in how we react to what happens. A critique, for one person a gentle breeze, but for another a deep cut, because inside them lie unhealed wounds. A failure, for one person a step back to grow further, but for another a total collapse, because their belief rested on fragile ground. You begin to understand. Suffering does not need to be avoided. It only needs to be seen. And when you look at it long enough, without judgment, without resistance, without blaming yourself, the suffering dissolves on its own. Like ice under sunshine, you do not need to defeat it. You do not need to overcome it. You only need to touch it with an unshakable mind. And then you no longer fear pain. Because you know, each pain that arrives offers you an opportunity to observe more deeply, to understand more clearly, and to grow a little more. And when you live with observation in each breath, each glance, each reaction, you no longer seek peace as a goal to attain. You live peacefully, as naturally as the sun rises each morning. Gently, unhurriedly, not for anyone to notice. And that is enough. And then, at some point in your journey back to yourself, you suddenly realize that everything you once chased, guarded fiercely, longed to own, was never truly what you needed. You have sacrificed sleep for a moment of acknowledgement. You have anguished over a single rejection. You have lost your way just for someone to say, "You are so kind." But after everything, after sitting long enough in silence, observing every wave rise and fall within yourself, you finally see, nothing in the world hurt you, only the expectations you gave the world. You were not hurt because someone was cold. You were hurt because you believed they had to be gentle. You did not break because a relationship ended. You broke because you believed that love would be forever. You did not fall from losing your job. You fell because you tied your whole worth to that role. So suffering never came from the world. It came from the illusions you projected onto the world. And once you mature enough to see that, you will no longer want to change other people or situations. You simply want to return and make adjustments within yourself, not by force, but through love, understanding, and honesty. Honesty with yourself is perhaps one of the hardest but most beautiful lessons to learn in mindful living. Because you must look directly at the subtle falseness of the ego, the competence you built to hide fear of being seen as inadequate, the kindness you carried to mask loneliness, the understanding you displayed out of fear that people would leave if you revealed your true weaknesses. When you are honest, you no longer hide behind admired masks. You dare to admit that sometimes you are tired, sometimes you are jealous, sometimes you are selfish, petty, or inconsistent, and all of that does not diminish your worth. Instead, you begin to love yourself more, like embracing a child who has been criticized too often simply for not meeting expectations. This honesty does not weaken you. On the contrary, it strengthens you, makes you more genuine, and deepens your connections with others who are also seeking themselves in a world full of noise and expectations. From that honesty, you begin to choose your life again. Not by adding more, but by choosing less. You speak fewer unnecessary words. You appear less where you are not needed. You stop maintaining an image. You step back from relationships that exhaust you. You leave roles that no longer fit a soul that is growing day by day. You live more slowly, not because you are lazy, but because you understand. No rush leads to true peace. You go deep with less. You eat with more gratitude. You speak with deeper meaning. You connect with fewer people but more sincerely. Each action, no matter how small, is infused with presence. You begin to cherish simple things, a quiet afternoon, a perfectly steeped cup of tea, an unjudging glance. You no longer need extravagance to feel sufficient. You feel enough, simply because you are real. And when you live in that authenticity, the people around you begin to change, not because you force them, but because they sense something in you that is gentle but profound. You do not need to preach. You do not need to advise. You do not need to prove anything. You just need to be present, with a peaceful energy, an unhurried look, an inner stillness, and those who are ready will naturally feel it. They may not say it, but they will begin to reflect on themselves when they are near you. They will adjust their tone, behavior, pace. They will start to listen to themselves more, because they once felt fully heard by you. That is a transformation so deep. It cannot be created by words. It can only be sparked by genuine presence. You become a slow-living person in a world of acceleration. A person who feels enough in a society that always wants more. A person who is grateful amid millions of comparisons. A person who remains quiet amid clamorous currents. A person who is gentle yet strong. You no longer need to be different to be special. You only need to be yourself. And that is enough. You no longer need more to be happy. You only need less of what disturbs your mind. You no longer need to be better to prove your worth. You only need to live deeply with what you do, what you have, and who you are. And do you know what? When you touch this truth, you realize that peace does not come from escaping, but from the ability to remain with things exactly as they are, not fixing, not hiding, not running, not clinging, just staying with yourself, right here, right now, not tomorrow. Not when you have enough money. Not when you are loved. Not when your wounds are healed. But this very moment, when you dare to stop. To truly listen. To look deeper. To live honestly. You have already touched the deepest freedom. And from that freedom, you realize you need nothing else to be enough. You already are, simply because you are real. So, after all those quiet stages you have walked through, letting go of other people's emotions, observing your mind without judgment, and learning to live authentically amidst life's many roles, you are gradually returning to something simple yet profoundly true: yourself. Not the you built from expectations, roles, or others' approval, but the innate you, whole, silent, and complete. You no longer feel the need to carry every emotional burden handed to you by others. You no longer cling to spiraling thoughts that weigh down your heart. You no longer chase lofty expectations that drive you to exhaustion. With each thing you release, you take another step toward freedom. With each moment of acceptance, you give space for peace to grow. You do not need to strive to be someone else to be worthy. You do not need to be always strong, always skillful, always gentle, always correct, just to be loved or noticed. All of that only takes you farther from yourself. And now you know. True love starts with honesty and mindfulness within you. You do not have to control others to feel safe. You do not need others to understand you to feel complete. You do not need to live up to expectations to have worth. Because everything you are seeking, peace, clarity, being loved, already exists inside you. They do not need to be found, they only need to be awakened. Remember what the Zen teacher said. You do not need to become someone else. You only need to remember that you are the sky, not the passing clouds. The clouds, emotions, Thoughts, circumstances, praise, criticism come and go. They may obscure you, make you lose your way, or trick you into thinking you are small or unworthy. But when you return to being the sky, you see, all of that is temporary. And you are the vast space that holds every movement, yet remains undisturbed within. Tomorrow will come again, with new challenges, new people to meet, and new lessons to learn. But this time, you will step into it more gently, no longer bearing everyone's burdens, no longer chasing recognition, no longer letting a chaotic mind chase unanswerable questions. You will greet the new day with enough, because you now understand, peace does not come from outside. It comes from how you breathe, how you look, how you stay with yourself, just in each moment. And if you have been able to sit with these words until now, it means the seed of awakening in you has already sprouted. Do not hurry. Do not rush yourself. Just keep returning. Each day, a bit, each breath, a moment, and you will see, life does not have to be perfect. Just being real, that is enough to live deeply, beautifully, and peacefully. Thank you for walking this silent journey with me. A journey without grand scenes or dramatic moments, but one of the deepest returns we each must make in our lives. Just by listening until the end, it means that somewhere inside you, a part has accepted, a part has been willing to let go, and a part has begun to blossom into understanding. Perhaps you are not completely at peace yet. Perhaps things are still unclear. But as long as you allow yourself to stop, breathe slowly, and truly listen, the seed of transformation has begun to awaken. If this video touched you, please share it with other souls who are also finding their way back to peace. You never know, just a soft whisper, a simple story, a moment of quiet, might help someone step across the darkness in their own heart. We may not see the impact of our small action, but if it is done sincerely, someone somewhere will feel it and be grateful for your presence. And do not forget to subscribe, so together we can continue future healing journeys, journeys that are not loud, but deep enough to touch your heart. Let us stay connected. Let us keep sitting together, through long nights, through weary days, to remind each other, you are not alone. And you deserve to live a life that is gentle. Thank you, once again, for being here. I look forward to walking with you in the next steps of this mindful journey.